So there's 4 police officers. I asked what it was about. They said, "Can we come in?" So I invited them in to my studio. I'm an artist, I live in a studio. And once we were all in the studio, they said, "I'm arresting you for sexual assault. A woman said that you sexually assaulted her at Waterloo Station in the early evening. And we're taking you to the station."
Not Waterloo.
Not Waterloo.
Yeah. So they take you to the station, they process you, we've got that bit, and then when you get to be interviewed, what did they say?
I was shown a very, very blurry photocopy of a CCTV still, and I was presented with this and asked if that was me. So I look at this very blurry black and white image, which vaguely looked like me, but I couldn't be sure. I mean, at that point I was assuming that I'd been confused with somebody else. So I said, "Well, it looks like me, but I can't be 100% certain." And they took that as a denial that I was denying that this was me in this image.
That's putting words in your mouth, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be 100% sure at that point. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't shown any other CCTV images. I didn't see those for another 6 months.
I'd forgotten that bit. So it was not a denial, it was an acceptance of the reality that you couldn't be 100% sure because it was...
Yeah, because they also showed me my Oyster card, or an Oyster card, which all looked the same, and said, "Is this your Oyster card?" Well, it looks like my Oyster card. I can't be certain it is mine. I haven't memorised the number.
But that's like showing someone a balloon and saying, "Is this your balloon?" Well, it's a pink balloon. I don't get that, but never mind. So then they interview you, and you've got a duty solicitor. You said? Did they
Which I got rid of him as soon as possible. He was useless. He didn't. I mean, I asked the officer in charge, how could I have penetrated this woman with my fingers when I was holding a newspaper in the hand that she said I assaulted her with? And that question wasn't answered by the police officer, and the solicitor didn't push that any further.
Sounds like he was having his own head on.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
at that point you think, well, this guy's not doing his job, so you get rid of someone who's not helping you.
And what else did the police ask you?
They asked if there's been any incidents that I could recall on the underground at Waterloo. The only one I could recall was bumping into somebody at the top of an escalator, but that was much earlier in that year.
Do you think they were fishing for...
I think they were trying to work out if I was a serial offender, because there was another guy arrested, committed an assault on the very same day that I was accused of assaulting somebody. That was in the morning, so they might have thought that somebody was hanging around Waterloo committing offences.
Hanging around Waterloo fingering people.
But that makes no sense. Why ask you? You're not going to say, "Yeah, I was hanging around Waterloo Station assaulting people."
It seems an incredibly silly question, but there we go. If there was someone, would they answer that question?
Yeah.
So then the real fun begins when you're released initially, presumably on bail?
Yeah. So I was on bail for 3 months until June. So I was arrested in February, and it wasn't until June that I was charged.
And you were charged with?
Sexual assault with penetration at that point. That changed later on to 2 separate charges of sexual assault with penetration and just sexual assault. I've no idea why that happened. So when I went to plead, which was, I think that was August, I pled to 2 separate charges of not guilty to 2 charges. But then by the time I went to trial, that changed back again to just 1 single charge of sexual assault with penetration.
And when you were charged and it went from the magistrates' court presumably up to Crown Court, because it's sexual assault with penetration's got to be.
Yeah.
What evidence did you eventually get to see? And
at the magistrates' court, I hadn't seen the CCTV, so it wasn't until I think it was late September, early October that I actually saw the images and read the transcript, the ABE that she made. And at that point, my solicitor and I just looked at these images and we couldn't actually see anything happening. We couldn't work out what we were supposed to be looking at, because all we could see was me walking through Waterloo Station. We didn't even know who the woman was on the images. So we had to read what the police had written to kind of work out what was supposed to be happening.
So then you see moving CCTV images?
No, these were stills. So I'm not sure if originally the images would have been a sequence or whether it would have been continuous footage. We think that it was continuous footage that was converted into a sequence of images. The images change once every second, but by the time it went to trial, 3 of the central images had been changed, we now know by the police, so that they changed in longer than a second. It was more like 2 seconds. So that gave the impression, if you saw it in a sequence, that I was taking longer to walk past this woman just on the 3 central images.
Just twice as long, in fact.
Yeah. So if you saw that as a sequence in court, you'd think that I took longer than I actually did to walk past the woman.
And how long was it in reality?
Half a second.
0.5 seconds?
Yeah.
And were you not holding something in both hands?
Yeah, I had my right hand on my backpack and my left hand was holding a newspaper.
And your third hand?
This is why I asked the question in the interview when I was first interviewed. What did I do with the newspaper? How could you sexually penetrate somebody with your fingers when you're holding a newspaper? Did I throw it in the air and then catch it?
Was or visible beforehand and visible after?
Yeah, you could clearly see me holding the newspaper. And we got an expert to look at the CCTV, and the CPS tried to stop him coming to court. He wrote a statement on what he saw in the CCTV, and he said it didn't fit with what she said. There was no match with what she was saying. He made a witness statement on paper, and they redacted most of what he said. They said it wasn't an expert analysis, it was just opinion. But that's his job. His job is to analyse footage at Warwick University. That's what he does for a living. So because they redacted most of what he said on paper, we had to get him to come to court in person. And he was brilliant. He wouldn't have what the prosecuting barrister was trying to say, which was, if you added up all the milliseconds of time that weren't seen on the CCTV images, there was plenty of time for me to commit a 2 to 3 second sexual assault with penetration, which doesn't make sense because the images change once per second.
Yes. You can't suddenly have more milliseconds inside the second.
Well, you can't fit 2 or 3 seconds within 1 second gaps. That doesn't make sense.
So a CPS barrister actually had the nerve to say that in open court?
That was in his summing up. But you could see the jury weren't having any of it. They could see he was just bullshitting.
It makes me wonder what should happen to barristers who bullshit, because to me that's a form of perjury. You see what I mean? Because he knows he's lying, the jury knows he's lying, he lied to try and get you prosecuted, But they are immune from that. They can do that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be allowed, should it?
No. I mean, I don't know whether I can get any redress for that. No. I'm trying. It's currently ongoing. So.
Because since this happened, you've been after the British Transport Police, I understand, in a civil action, or is it in a complaints form?
No, it's a complaint. So it's an IOPC, what used to be IPCC complaint.
Mm-hmm.
The first re-investigation that the British Transport Police made was a complete whitewash. That is their normal course of action, is to look at it again, say we didn't do anything wrong, go away, you were found not guilty, why are you complaining? So after that first whitewash re-investigation, you're allowed to appeal to the IOPC. So we asked for another investigation, and that was by an outside force. That was the York Transport Police, still Transport Police, so it's not as objective as you'd like. But they concluded that there was a case to answer for misconduct.
Right.
Well, actually, they said gross misconduct, but the senior officer at the BTP has pushed that down back to misconduct, which isn't satisfactory for us. So we've put that in again on another appeal to the IOPC, and hopefully they will take it more seriously.
Because what they're accused of is altering evidence to try and produce a guilty...
Altering evidence, withholding evidence. The officer in charge withheld an early witness statement. So the actress, supposedly just after the assault, she went to work. She didn't report the assault straight away. She went to work and then came back through Waterloo Station later in the evening and then reported it. And she spoke to somebody at work, didn't mention a sexual assault, but said a push to the abdomen or the chest.
Mm-hmm.
But this first witness statement wasn't taken until June, just before, 2 days before I was charged. So the officer in charge should have taken that statement much earlier on. And it seems to be that when he realised I was going to be charged, he, at the last minute, decided to take that witness statement.
Very ropey.
That statement didn't come out until we were actually in court. My barrister asked if there were any such statements, and all along was told by the CPS that no such statements existed. There were no witness statements. And then when the officer in charge was in court in the dock, my barrister asked him if there were any witness statements, expecting the answer no, and the officer in charge said yes, at which point the whole court went quiet. Everyone looked at each other, and we had to adjourn while me and my barrister read the statement.
Because that's kind of like proven lie. Really.
Yeah, he claimed that he'd sent it to the CPS by email. They said they never received it. But
he'd also denied that it existed before.
Yeah, there's still a question there.
Right.
He was asked why he didn't take that statement, and he made a very weird response. He said he thought the guy who he wanted to interview was in Bolivia. The guy has never been to Bolivia, he's never mentioned Bolivia. He doesn't understand why the officer in charge thought he was in Bolivia.
Sorry, I've got this weird conspiracy theory in my head that this policeman has got a way out of being caught for corruption, which is just mention Bolivia.
Well, it's just such a weird response to a basic question.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it?
It's like he just said the first thing that came into his head.
That's what I mean. Jesus. And then time goes by, the jury have rightly seen through all this. Your life is sort of back to normal, or is it?
No. it'll never get back to normal. I mean, I'm sure eventually I'll get back to some semblance of normality, but once this has happened to you, your whole attitude to the judiciary, the police, society in general, it's altered for good. Your trust in society and the way citizens are treated, it's just changed. It'll never go back to how it was. I mean, in some ways it's a positive in that my naivety has gone, but there's a very big downside, obviously. Once you've seen those images, you can't possibly, unless you're working for the CPS or the police, you can't possibly think that was true. Well, the police and the CPS aren't normal people. They're abnormal.
Yeah.
They are what I would say they're perverts, because they're perverting justice. They're the perverts. It makes you realise just how far people in authority will go just to get the ends that they want. They're not interested in justice, they're not interested in the truth.
Or evidence even. Unless it's for them.
This is what makes me angry, the fact that I went public with my case 2 years before Liam Allen hit the headlines. When I went to the CPS and I met the head of legal services, he said, his words were, "Lessons will be learned from this." Nothing was learned.
No.
They had no intention of learning any lessons.
No.
They just carried on in worse than they'd been with my case.
Yeah.
You know? And there's an ever-growing number of people that have been falsely accused and treated like shit by the CPS and the police and the judiciary, who should know better. I mean, the judge in my case said nothing about how impossible it was to have done what she said. He just let the trial carry on.
And at the end, when you were found not guilty, did he say anything?
No, just, "You're free to go, Mr. Pearson."
That's it.
That's it. You know, I've heard people say they've broken down in tears, or they've been elated. I just felt nothing. I just felt numb. I just thought, what the hell was all that for? A whole year of my life. And the whole court trial had been a pantomime. Everyone there knew what I was being accused of wasn't possible. And yet everyone just carried on playing their role.